Hi, everyone. Welcome to Un-PACT the 89th session. We are PACT, the Parole Advocacy Coalition of Texas. We're going to get started in just a few minutes. We're going to play just some little vibey music and just give people an opportunity to come in. So if you're in, don't leave. Give us about 90 seconds and let's get people brought in. And we're really excited to get going on this. We see y'all coming in. Stay tuned. We're getting started in about 60 seconds, just giving folks a moment to hop in here. So excited to see everybody. Welcome in, y'all. Hi. We see y'all coming in. Welcome, welcome. We're going to be getting started in just 15 to 20 seconds, just giving folks a chance to get in. While y'all are coming in, please drop in the chat. And I already see some of you in the chat. Y'all drop in the chat where you're coming in. Where in Texas are you watching from? Are you in Texas? Do we have any out of Texas folks wanting to see what happened at the Texas Legislative session? If so, tell us that too. Yeah, please utilize that chat and tell us where you're watching from. We're streaming on several different platforms with several different organizations. We're really excited to come together. We have a lot of representation in this. So we see you, Deja's in the chat, and we see you, Deja. Anthony, hello. Y'all tell us where y'all are tuning in from. Humid Houston in the house. Jessica in Houston. Anthony tuning in from 210 San Antonio. Sending that love Justin's way. Justin's from San Antonio also. David tuning in from Corpus Christi. Brittany from Weatherford, Texas, near the DFW area. Deanna's tuning in from Greenville. Welcome, welcome. Deja's also in San Antonio. Welcome. I think that we're so excited to see y'all, and those of you that are just now hopping in, feel free to drop where you're tuning in from in the chat. And I think that we are about ready to get going. Y'all, we are so excited to be here. We are going to Un-PACT the 89th legislative session. We're really going to break down some of the things that happen at the Capitol in Austin, and we're going to do it the best way that we can so that it's digestible for everybody, for folks like me that aren't big policy people also. So I'm super excited about that. We are the Parole Advocacy Coalition of Texas, PACT, and we're really excited to be here. We are a coalition that have come together from several different organizations, people that are concerned about the parole process in Texas. And so that's our priority, is to spread awareness about how the parole process works, and gosh, we need some changes in that area too. So we're going to work on advocating and making changes in that area. We're going to get started, and I'm going to introduce Justin Martinez. Justin is with Latino Justice. I'm going to pull him up. Justin, just if you want to give a real brief introduction to yourself, and we'll jump right in.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Welcome in. I'm so glad y'all are here. So grateful to be here with you all and spending this evening with everyone. But yeah, my name's Chester Martinez. My pronouns are he/him. I'm with Latino Justice and part of the core team that's kind of helping guide and build out this wonderful coalition that we have. So yeah, Marcy, I'm ready to get started if we're good.
Let's do it.
Okay, all right, y'all. Well, again, welcome to Un-PACT the 89th session, hosted by the Parole Advocacy Coalition of Texas. Again, we are super grateful to have you all here. I know Marcy kind of talked a little bit about who we are, so I'm not going to dig into this a whole lot, but I do just want to point out these beautiful people in these pictures. I do want to just say that, one of the things that we did that was just super exciting this past year and this past session was we hosted sort of Texas's first advocacy day that really focused on parole issues, right? So we got people to the Capitol, we had a little training, people went and saw their representatives and talked about parole and all of that stuff. And so you can see some of those pictures there. But so why are we here today? So a lot happened this past legislative session, to say the very least, particularly around a lot of the things I think a lot of us care about, right? Parole, which we'll talk about, AC, good time bill, commutation bills, right? A bunch of stuff that I think was really touched on in this past legislative session. Um, you know, like other sessions, right? I think the 89th Texas legislature brought, another wave of bills sort of aimed at making parole, particularly parole, uh, even more burdensome, even more dehumanizing, and kind of an out of reach process for the tens of thousands of people that go through the system every year, and not to mention the roughly 90,000 or so people who are on parole supervision. But one of the things that I love about PACT is that this is not the whole story. Yes, we saw a lot of harmful legislation come through this past legislative session. Yes, we saw a lot of awful rhetoric targeting people caught up just generally in the criminal legal system. And it certainly was a difficult political climate. I mean, I think it kind of always is, right? We live in Texas, but this session had an extra flavor of difficultiness there. But despite all of that, there were also lots of powerful moments of resistance and of joy and of collective action. And those moments matter just as much as the hard ones. You can see there's another picture of us at our Parole Advocacy Day. And so, yes, PACT, we are on the ground, we are in the fight, we get dirty, but we're also really intentional about building and cultivating spaces of joy and celebration amongst all of the other stuff too, right? So let's talk a little bit about the agenda. So we'll go over the agenda. So we'll start. I'll go through a very, very quick overview, brief overview of the Texas legislature and the process and how it works. And then the bulk of our time, we'll talk about just legislation, right? So some of the stuff I talked about, like parole, AC, commutation, like what happened, right? So what passed, what didn't, what you need to know, how is it going to impact you? We'll talk about sunset. If you don't know what sunset is, well, we'll talk about that, what it is and why it matters. And we'll have Q&A sprinkled throughout, but we'll have a dedicated time for sure towards the end for Q&A. Then we'll talk about next steps, and then we'll get out of here. So let's get started. Okay, so the Texas legislature, a crash course. Okay. So before we get into some specific bills, I did kind of wanted to again give a brief overview of the session, right, and the Texas legislature and what is involved in trying to get a bill passed, right? So let's kind of first looking at the numbers. So this past legislative session, we were definitely busy. There were 9,000 bills that were filed this past legislative session, y'all. 9,000. That is the highest number of bills filed in Texas since at least the early 90s, which is wild to think. And of those 9,000 bills, we only had 1,200 that actually passed, right? So we're talking like these bills, like overall bills, only 1,200 passed. Now, this is critical because I know a lot of people ask like the challenges that bills face and why is it so hard for bills to move through. And this is kind of it, right? Like this process, and you'll hear me say this probably multiple times, but this process wasn't built to move lots of legislation, okay? So again, we had 1,200 bills that actually passed. So that means there was only about 14% of bills that made it across that finish line. And so that is the lowest passage rate that we've seen in decades. So I mean, again, this most legislative sessions aren't easy, but this one was definitely a difficult one. And I was doing some research, and just for comparison's sake, Texas usually sees a bill passage rate of closer to 20%. Okay. And then, of course, we had 28 bills that were vetoed by the governor. And again, many bills will enter this process, and very, very few will actually make it out. Okay. Okay, let's talk a little bit about how the legislator works. Um, so, one thing that makes the Texas legislative process unique, and I think there's a lot of ways in which it's unique here, but is how often it meets. Okay, when you look at other states and you look at other legislators, of the 50 states, a majority of them, I think it's like 46, their legislators meet annually, right? So they're meeting every year. Texas is one of 4 states where that does not happen. We don't do that here. Texas meets every 2 years. Okay, so we meet every 2 years. And the Texas legislature begins in January and will end in early June, right? Which means we have a 140-day window to do the thing, right? Which is not a lot of time. And that's the other reason why you see bills where it's hard to get things to the finish line, because you just got so much to do in so little time, right? So again, we meet every 2 years for 140 days, and that's called the regular session. Okay. Now, if you've been paying attention to the news, you've probably heard this thing called the special session. And the special session is just that, it is special. Okay. Only the governor can call a special session. A special session is limited. The legislative agenda is limited. So in the regular session, lawmakers can file all kinds of bills over all kinds of issues, right? In the special session, lawmakers are limited to what the government has set out, right? Technically speaking, lawmakers can file bills, but if it's not on that list that the governor has called for, it's not going to really go anywhere. And also, the special session only lasts 30 days, up to 30 days, whereas the regular session, you had 140 days. Okay. Now, in between those regular sessions, we have what is called the interim. Okay, the interim. Now, even though the legislator is not working on specific bills during the interim, right? Like they're not moving legislation. This still is a very important time for us, for folks who are in this type of work, because the legislator will often use this period, right? This period in between those regular sessions to study and look at all kinds of issues, some of which could turn into legislative priorities moving into the next session, right? So if you're an advocate, right, and you're working on these issues, this is a very fertile ground for you to start planting seeds that will hopefully grow into bills that get filed into next session, right? Also, too, because the interim tends to be a little bit quieter than the regular session, it's a really good time to go meet your legislator. Okay. Let's talk about just the makeup of the legislature. We'll kind of breeze through this. So the legislature, like all legislators, is made up of 2 chambers. You got the Texas House of Representatives and you got the Texas Senate. Okay. And in the Texas House, you have 150 members, and each one of those members represents a district where their populations are around 170,000 people. And then on the other side of the building, you have the Texas Senate. In Texas Senate, you have 31 members, and each one of those senators represents a district of around 811,000 people. And of course, Texas is a Republican state. We got a Republican governor, a Republican lieutenant governor, and a Republican Speaker of the House, right? And the Speaker of the House is just someone that presides over the Texas House of Representatives. And each chamber is also controlled by Republicans. So in the House, you have 88 Republicans and 62 Democrats. And on the Senate side, we have 20 Republicans and 11 Democrats. And if you look at the pictures on the left, the top one where you see the green carpet, that's the Senate. You can always tell it's the Senate because of that green carpet. And then the one on the bottom, that's a picture of what the Texas House of Representatives looks like. Okay. All right, now let's get into the fun stuff, okay? The legislative process. Okay, so now understand, this could be like a whole conversation on its own. Like we could easily have like a multi-day training on just this legislative process. Okay, for today, we're just going to talk about the big highlights of what it is. So how a bill becomes law, there's essentially four steps, okay? The bill has to get filed, has to go through the committee process, it has to go to the floor, right, and get voted and passed. and then it has to hit the governor's desk. Okay, those are like the four big, like major pillars, major steps of a bill's journey in becoming a law. Okay, and of course, the first step is a bill getting filed and introduced. Okay, now every bill starts with an idea. And that idea can come from lots of places. It can come from the lawmaker itself. It can come from folks like us who are advocates. It can come from lobbyists, but it can also come from just people within the community. It can really come from anywhere. Now, the thing to keep in mind is that only a legislator, right, or a member of the Texas House or Texas Senate can actually officially file the bill. Okay, and you can kind of see the visual of sort of what that is there. The other two things to keep in mind when we're talking about bill filing that's important is, so even though I talked about how the regular legislative session starts in January, lawmakers actually start filing bills way before that. They start filing bills 60 days before the legislative session starts. So starting in early November, lawmakers can start filing bills, and that's important because you don't have to wait till the first day of session to start working on things, right? Like you want to be on top of that, and particularly knowing that these things are getting filed in early November. That's important to keep in mind as you're going throughout the process. Now, on the flip side, there's also a deadline for bills to be filed, right? Legislators can't just file bills throughout the entire session, and that deadline is in March. So by March, generally speaking, if a bill needs to be filed, and if it misses that deadline, then it's missed its opportunity and it's not going to be heard. And so that's also another reason why it can be challenging for bills to move, because sometimes they can just miss that deadline and there's nothing that can be done, right? You have to wait until next session. Okay, so that's the first step, getting a bill filed and introduced. The next step, now y'all, this is where the drama happens. This is the exciting piece of the puzzle here, and that's the committee process. So once you have an idea for a bill, right, you get that bill filed, then it gets assigned to a committee by either the Speaker of the House or the Lieutenant Governor. And that just depends on where the bill originates from, right? So if the bill is starting at the Texas House, then the Speaker of the House will assign that bill to a committee. If it's starting on the Senate, then Lieutenant Governor will assign that bill to a committee. And look, here's the thing. The reality is that this is where most bills just do not make it, right? This is often called the graveyard because a lot of bills just a lot enter and many don't make it out. Okay. But once a bill is referred to committee, then it's up to the committee chair. So here comes the committee chair. This is something else to keep in mind. The committee chairs have lots of power, and a lot of that power is deciding when and if bills get heard. Okay, that's another check in the box of like traps you need to hope try and get your bill through, right? A committee chair could just not act on the bill, right? Cannot bring it up for a hearing and it won't go anywhere, right? Again, the committee chairs have lots of power in this. However, if a bill does get a hearing, then they'll have an open meeting where you and I can go and give public comments and testimony and advocate on the bill and all that good stuff. And then after a hearing, really two things can happen, right? It can just sit in committee and nothing happens, right? Or it can get voted on, right? And it can either get voted favorably, meaning it gets out of committee, or it could miss getting the required votes and ends up dying in committee that way, right? So this is like this part of the legislative process is honestly arguably probably the most important points of advocacy, right? Getting your bill heard is a major chunk of the battle. And you have to do a lot of work to get that happen. You can't just file a bill and just kind of, wish it luck. I mean, you've got to really put in a lot of work, especially at this point in time, to make sure it gets heard. And then the next step is essentially the floor, right? So if you have a bill that makes it through the committee process, right, that is a huge win. You should celebrate that. And then it gets moved to get scheduled for a floor vote, right, or a vote by the full legislative body. Okay, and the important thing to remember here is it has to survive 2 votes. Okay? It's not just 1 vote, it has to survive 2 votes. So it has to get voted on and passed twice in this process for it to move. Now, I will say there are tons of very creative ways that lawmakers will use in this process to slow down bills or to stop bills, which we're not going to have time to go through tonight, right? But so there's a lot of pitfalls here too that can really impact a bill. Yeah, so who is the committee chairman right now? So there's, I don't know, I think the House has like, I don't know, probably 10 plus, if not 15 more. Like there's a lot of committees, right? And so each one of those committees has a chairman. So, like for us, House Corrections is a big committee that we are always involved in because that's where a lot of parole stuff goes. And that committee chairman was Representative Sam Harless, right? But each committee will have its own chairman, and those chairs can change throughout each session, right? Um, okay. Now, last thing. If you're able to get it and it passes the House, again, you should celebrate and jump for joy, but also keep in mind that you're going to have to essentially rinse and repeat on the Senate side. So, so again, like this, there's just a lot, and again, like I mentioned before, there's so much we can talk about when it comes to the legislative process. But so if you get to the House, everything I just talked about generally applies for the Senate side too. Okay, and then the last thing we'll talk about is, of course, the governor, right? So you got a bill filed, got a bill introduced, got it through committee, got it to the House, got it to the Senate. Now it's on the governor's desk. Okay, and the governor can do really one of three things. The governor can sign it into law, and then you're good to go. The governor could veto it, or the governor can just let it go into law without it being signed. And so those are really the only actions that can happen with the governor. So, and then the last step. So this visual here. So this is the entire process. So the blue is what we talked about. That was the Texas House. And then the red, that's the Texas Senate, right? So this is probably not the best graphic, but it's one of the only few that really like highlight a lot of the points in which things can happen when it comes to like a bill's journey throughout this process. So yeah, that in a very nutshell is how bills move through the legislative process and become law.
Justin, that was amazing. I'm going to say, if you're watching right now, this is a good time to take a screenshot because that was a lot of information. Also, you can always come back to this live, whatever platform you're watching on right now. You can go back and watch the beginning to recap something that you might have missed. That's a lot of information, especially for folks like me that aren't used to like working in that area. So that was incredibly amazing. I'm just like, screenshot before we take this away.
Yeah. Okay, so now are we ready to get into the real reason why we're all here? Okay.
Yes, let's break down those bills and let's talk about it, because people ask us all the time, did this bill happen? What happened with this bill? And then sometimes it passes the House or it passes committee, and then they're like, yay, that we have a new law. And it doesn't work that way. Now we know it doesn't work that way. So let's talk about each bill and really, really get into the meat and bones here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, and before we get started, so like, when it comes to like parole, I mean, there were give or take like 50 bills that touched parole. We're obviously not going to talk about all of those, right? But we have a handful of ones that, again, to Marcy's point, that we've just gotten either a lot of comments on or questions on, or bills that we advocated on, or bills like we know, like, hey, our people need to know about some of these changes. So we're going to talk about one of those. And I'm so happy to have my crew here to help me through some of this stuff too. So the first one we're going to talk about, I think, is one of those that you're going to want to pay attention to. So this one is Senate Bill 1506 by Senator Tan Parker. He's a Republican. And this is a bill that did pass and is signed into law and will take effect September 1st of this year. Okay. Now, this bill deals with the frequency at which some people come up for their parole reviews after being denied, right? So often we call that a set-off, right? So a set-off is the time between when a person is denied parole and their next parole review. And so this bill makes some important changes that folks should probably be aware of. And again, I'm really glad to have my crew here, because no matter how many times I talk about this bill, like, I get twisted Sometimes I get twisted in it. But essentially how it currently is, and again, folks jump in. But so when you come up for parole and get denied, right, depending on your offense, you can get set off in various ways, right? Some folks incarcerated can get up to a 10-year set off, right? So they can get denied parole and they won't see parole board again until 10 years. Some people can get a set off of up to 5 years, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 year set off. And then there are some folks currently, now this is where things change with this bill. There are some folks currently that are required to receive a 1-year set off every single time they're denied parole. Okay. And this is what this bill changes. Okay. So this bill would have it to where those people who were used to receiving those 1-year set offs could now potentially be set off up to 5 years. Okay. Now, before I stop and let my folks here chime in, there is an important exception to this bill. Okay. A carve out. If someone's incarcerated and they're incarcerated for like a possession offense, like a drug possession offense, they will still get the 1-year set off. Okay. But everyone else who's not incarcerated for a drug possession offense, who normally is used to getting that 1-year set off, could now see a 2-year, 3-year, 4-year, or up to a 5-year set off. So I'll pause there and see if, I don't know, Helen or anyone else have anything they want to add, or if we've got questions coming in.
I was going to mention that this is retroactive, so it will apply to anybody who's currently incarcerated and coming up for parole. It's not just for people who are getting new convictions.
Yeah, that's an important point. You're actually going to hear that term either retroactive or not retroactive throughout the night, right? And so what Helen is saying is that being retroactive, this is going to apply to everyone currently inside, and then everyone who's coming in after that effective date of September 1st, right? This is applying to everyone.
So now's a good time to let folks know that the chat is open. And if you have questions as we're going through these bills, please feel free to drop those questions in the chat. And I do see Jessica hopping on.
Yeah.
Jessica.
Yeah, Jessica. Yeah. So, so the carve out is for those who are in there for like certain drug possession charges. They are still in that 1-year set off. Okay.
And I would just add to that, it's not that they're the only charges that would get a 1-year set off. They're the only ones that are required to have a 1-year set off that can't have a longer set off.
Yeah. Yes, good point, Helen.
I think we had a little bit of back and forth between I think that there were some folks even thinking that this might be beneficial because coming up for parole every year and getting denied and getting denied and getting denied, it can wear out on an incarcerated person. And so there were some like conflicting ideas of if this bill should go through or not.
Yeah. I certainly have thoughts. I'm gonna give some space, but I can certainly chime in on that.
Just want to make sure folks know that no matter what platform you're watching from, we see your comments. And so if you can please feel free to drop your questions.
Yeah. I think that's right, Marcy, that when I speak with board members, a lot of times the concern is one, if people are trying to make objections, that it's year after year after year they have to come and file the objections, but also the concern about family members and not wanting to have that repeated disappointment year after year. And so, yes, I agree with Justin. I have my own thoughts on that, but I think those are some of the motivating factors behind this. Also, the sense that for individuals who have been spending time, if they've been sitting in jail for a while and they get out, often they're coming up for parole very quickly. And the board would like to see a little bit more time before they have another review.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and I see a lot of questions coming in. So Brittany, can they give you the same reasons for now every time? Yeah, I think that's part of the big frustration is that, yeah, you can get the same reason over and over and over again, with little to no, like, okay, what are you wanting to see here? So yes. Does the board read letters from non-victims of a case?
Do you mean, Erica, are you speaking to about family members or supporters who are going to submit a letter? The board should be reading those letters. They certainly have those letters in the file. And I would say the sooner those letters come in, if the institutional parole officer has a chance to read those letters, that's even more helpful. Because they will be reviewing the full file before they write a case summary and send that on to the board for the decision.
Helen, I wonder if Erica is asking, which was a question we always had while we were incarcerated. Hey, everybody, my name is Jennifer Toon. I'm with the After Violence Project, and I'm also with Linus. I think the question is someone who's not a supporter and who's not a registered actual victim through the court proceeding as a victim, but someone who's writing a protest letter, like someone in the community that just wants to write a protest letter that had nothing to do per se with the actual offense as a registered victim. Do those types of protest letters carry the same weight as victim protest letters?
I think it depends, and my sense would be, it depends on what the role the person plays and their connection to the underlying offense. And so if it's somebody who may not be the victim but has was somehow directly impacted or has some connection to it, then I think they're going to give it some weight. And if it's somebody with an organization that is weighing in on something, they'll give it some amount of weight. If it's somebody who really has no connection to the location, to the offense, to the issue at hand, my sense is they would not give it much weight at all.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, and if any other stuff comes up, maybe we can try and keep track of that, or maybe if folks can just, when we get to the Q&A at the end, if we didn't get to your question, we can pop it in there again too. So yeah, so that's the first big bill to be mindful of. The next one that I'm pretty sure folks are going to want to know about is House Bill 2854. That's by Representative Rafael Anchia, who's a Democrat. This is another bill that was passed, signed into law, and will take effect September 1st. And this bill would add new restrictions on visiting hospitals for certain people who are on parole. Okay, and it will also require parole officers, when approving a person's visit to the hospital, to notify law enforcement. Okay, so let me break that down a little bit more. So starting September 1st, which is that effective date, if you are placed on parole supervision and you were convicted of what we call a 3G offense, right? So aggravated robbery, aggravated kidnapping, right, and other offenses, or had a deadly weapon finding involved in your case, and are required to be in electronic monitoring as part of your parole conditions, you will be required to get permission from your parole officer before visiting a hospital. Okay, unless it's like a medical emergency or you're getting medical treatment, that's not what's covered here. Like if you have a loved one who's at a hospital, you can't just go and visit, right? If you meet that above criteria I just met, right? You have to get permission from your parole officer first, okay? And then once you have that permission, right? Once your parole officer gives you that permission, then your parole officer is required to notify law enforcement of your visit to that hospital, right? Including the date, the time, and the reason for your visit. Okay. Now, this is not retroactive. Okay. This is not retroactive, meaning this only applies to someone who's on parole, again, who meets those criteria after September 1st. Okay. If you or a loved one is already on parole and like they've been and they were convicted of a 3G offense and they have a requirement of electronic monitoring and they're already on parole, this law doesn't impact you at all. Okay, this only applies to people who are going on parole, who've been convicted of a 3G offense, and who are required to be on electronic monitoring after September 1st. Okay, and obviously that's incredibly important. I mean, again, we could talk a lot about how there is a huge backstory to this. I'm going to keep myself from talking about because I can go down the rabbit hole. But there's a huge backstory behind why this bill even happened. But obviously, this is incredibly important because we know how easy it is to trip up on these technical violations. And now you have a situation where you've got this big change in the law, and you could have someone who's visiting their mom or their kid has an emergency, or like something happened in which they need to go to a hospital. That to be aware that you could risk violation, right? If you meet that criteria, right? If doesn't apply to everyone who's on parole, right? It's just those specific people. But yeah, again, I don't know if anyone else has anything they want to say.
Yeah, you know how strongly I felt about this bill. This bill really made me angry. I myself was on electronic monitoring, which I was on the caseload of SISP, which is super intensive supervision. So we had to go through this process regardless because of our schedules. We have to make a handwritten schedule to submit. Now, the caveat there was what was different was nobody was contacting law enforcement in the hospital to say, hey, Jennifer Toon's going to be up there visiting her grandmother who just got out of surgery, right? Like, so to know that this is going to apply to, just like you said, that population that is on all electronic monitoring, the backstory to why this happened and why this bill is here is a really clear example of knee-jerk reaction to public safety that does not really do anything to impact public safety. And you'll see here, as what Justin said, these were Democrats that filed this. And so I know that a little political education can kind of guide you to where both parties stand on criminal justice reform, but that's not always a guarantee, because this was well supported by a lot of Democrats that are normally pretty open to a lot of other criminal justice bills. So I hate to say this, y'all, but like when another tragedy happens because they didn't really resolve the real problem of public safety around those ankle monitors, then what's the excuse? What's the next dog and pony show that's going to be put up before the public to symbolically address a problem without addressing it? So I love that you were a little bit more restrained, but I couldn't take it. I couldn't take it. I hate this bill. It's terrible, and it's just for show, and I don't see any real impact, except how it creates more barriers for people who are on electronic monitoring and who are trying to do well.
Yeah.
So we don't have time, Jen, to go into like the full backstory of why this bill even got written to begin with, but could you give some guidance on where folks could look that up, or what should they Google to find that?
It was the Dallas Methodist Hospital, and there was a tragedy there with a gentleman on an ankle monitor visiting someone in the hospital. Or you can reach out to one of us later, and we can direct you to just do your own research. Why this happened and all the complicated reasons why it did. So yeah.
to make sure that I post it on like the Texas Prisons Alliance page. So if any of you are watching from the TPA page, we can make sure that we post the backstory. We have that in the bill toolkit and our advocacy toolkit. So I can post some links to kind of like the proclamation for this bill, and then also the backstory of this bill.
Yeah, the two things I would want to point out just to highlight, I think they've both been mentioned, but I think this is where people will run into trouble. One is it applies to any kind of monitor. So it doesn't, even if you're on a curfew monitor and you're not used to having to get pre-approval, you're part of that, same, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be a GPS monitor.
Right.
And the second is just to really be clear that the only exception here is if it's the person on the monitor themselves having a medical emergency. They can't prevent you from being admitted into the emergency room in an emergency. But if you're a sole, a caregiver for your parent or grandparent, and they're having a medical emergency, the exception doesn't apply to you. Someone else will have to accompany the person to, or your child to the hospital.
Yeah. Okay. Moving along. So the next one is House Bill 1024. This is by Representative Matthew Shaheen. This is another bill that also passed and signed into law and will take effect September 1st. I will say just off the top, I don't really think that a lot really changes here with this bill. Essentially, what it's saying is if you're on super-intensive supervision, okay, and you have a warrant that is issued because of some violation with your electronic monitoring, then essentially the bill is like saying, hey, law enforcement, pay attention and do something with that quickly. And which is kind of what it already was, to be honest, or at least how I read it. Maybe other folks might read it differently, but it kind of was already like that. So I don't really know how much this is going to change, but I think it's important to know, though, if you know someone who's on SISP, which to Jen's point is already just full of barriers to people who are just trying to rebuild their lives, right? That if there is a warrant issued around a violation of electronic monitoring, that the language is, I think it's just tweaked enough to maybe try and give the impression to law enforcement that we as a legislator want you to take this seriously. And this is not retroactive. Okay, so this only applies to a warrant that's been issued after September 1st. Okay. Does anyone else have anything they want to add? Yeah, I mean, again, I don't really think this is going to change a lot of, I think, what already happens, but just want folks to be aware of. Okay, cool. We'll keep things going. All right, let's get to some lighter stuff, y'all. Okay, let's get to some lighter things here. So the next bills we're going to talk about are voting rights bills, right? These bills touch on trying to give folks in Texas who have a felony conviction their right to vote again. So those are House Bill 4594 and House Bill 590 by Representative John Busey, who's a Democrat. Now these bills did not pass. So both of these bills were referred to committee, but never got a public hearing. So you remember back when I was talking about the legislative process, like you get a bill filed, get it introduced, you get it referred to committee, and then the chair doesn't call it up. It just sits there, and that's what happened with these bills, right? And it ended up not going anywhere. I'm going to let Jen and Marcy talk a lot about these because they were part of a group that really moved me. But I do just want to say real quick on what these bills will do. So HB 4594 would essentially just restore, like kind of what I talked about, would restore the right to vote for people convicted of a felony who are on supervision, right? And that's both probation and parole. Okay. And then House Bill 590 would require the state to issue a notice for a person that's been previously convicted of a felony that, hey, you are now re-eligible to vote again. Because that's what happens, but the state doesn't tell you. They're not like, hey, here's your right, you got your right to vote again. There's no notification process to that. Or at least that's what my understanding is. And House Bill 590 kind of tries to remedy that. But I'll let Jen and Marcy talk a lot about these bills.
Yeah, Marcy, please, you did such a great job really explaining at the press conference with the legislators and Brother Rob and other advocates. So I would love pretty much for you to share, with folks tonight what you shared that day.
Yeah, thanks so much for that, Jen. And like Justin said, House Bill 4594 would have restored the voting rights for people like me, people on probation, or excuse me, on parole. And as it stands right now, I am not eligible to vote in any election, local elections, presidential elections, state elections, nothing, until 2030, when I am completely off of parole. The way the law stands now is people with felony convictions in the state of Texas can vote after their sentence has been completely exhausted, which means no paper for y'all. No, you can't be on paper. If you're on probation, parole, none of that. And you can't vote while after you've been convicted while you're incarcerated. And so it was frustrating. It's frustrating not to be able to vote, to be in a situation like me where I'm home raising my family, not able to decide who's on the local school boards for my kiddos going to school. I'm paying taxes, working. Obviously, the parole board trusted me enough to be in the community. And so I feel like I should also then be trusted enough to use my voice to shape the policies that affect me and my family. And so that didn't go. I will say, though, in other states, they're doing this. There are states that as soon as you walk out of prison, you have your rights restored, whether you're on paper or not. And so that gives us hope. And, this is something that personally I will continue to advocate for change for sure. Now, House Bill 590, y'all, I felt like it had a really good chance of passing. It was not a, hey, let's change up a bunch of rules and let's give people more rights, God forbid. It wasn't that. It was, hey, it's occurring to us that people don't realize they have the right to vote. Folks don't realize, and I'll tell you personally, and as a member of Lioness, we get that all the time. In fact, sometimes I'll post a video saying you can vote once you're off of parole, and I will have folks in my comment section saying, no, you can't. Not if you have a felony background. And that's what people believe. And what that's doing is, if we hold on to that belief and if we don't spread awareness, if people don't know, well, it's silencing our voices. And so how do we get our voice back? Well, we make sure and notify the people. That's what this bill would do, that once you finished your sentence and became eligible to vote, you would be notified. That's all. The very simple law. And, I really appreciated it for being for being written and being filed and all of these things. And again, something that we'll work towards. There are some organizations that are not only pushing for this bill, but also just getting creative on how to notify folks on their own. So.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Okay, so keep on going. Okay, so now I know we're getting to a bill that I know a lot of people talk a lot about. So this is HB 2940. This is the good time bill. Okay, this is by Representative Vinton Jones, who's a Democrat. So as I'm sure y'all are unfortunately aware, this bill did not pass, right? This bill was referred to committee, right? So again, it's referred to committee, but it never got heard. Okay, so it got filed, got introduced, got referred, but just kind of stuck in committee for various reasons. Again, I'm gonna let Jen talk a lot about this, but I know this is a bill that has a lot of history, and I know really touches a lot of people. And I think for me, when I was looking through it, it's like I think it did two things that were important to me, right? I think this bill is trying to expand who can just be able to earn good time, right? And then also something that's really important to me is tries to change how good conduct time affects parole eligibility for people with more serious cases, right? So that whole narrative that, look, we all can do some stuff, right? But we also all have the ability to move beyond that and to grow beyond that, and we should all have the opportunity for that to be reflected in these things, and shouldn't be disqualified because of whatever offense you're incarcerated for, right? So I'll let Jen talk a little bit about the Good Time Bill.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. I feel like probably everybody that's watching this tonight knows what the Good Time Bill is, and has heard it, knows about it, almost urban legend style, is that the Good Time Bill has been a bill that has been attempted for many, many years. And y'all, I think it's important that we're honest about, again, that political environment that we're in. Who controls the governor's seat, the lieutenant governor, the House, the Senate, the committees, the chairs? They are all Republican. And so, again, we're not here to be partisan. What I'm saying is that that political party tends to view good time, and what the Good Time Bill would do is not aligned with their ideas about public safety, right? So to get really grounded in like the reality of where we're at, I think could help people with their hope and their realistic hope for the Good Time Bill. I think it's still worth, just because the people in power don't see it as something that they want to do, that doesn't have to be forever, right? Like I still think that we should stay in the fight to be able to one day see it over the finish line. And that's gonna take a lot of work, y'all. Like Justin mentioned, it didn't even get a hearing. So it didn't even, a lot of times at the end of session, bill authors know there's not enough time to get their bill from committee to all the way through the process that Justin talked about. So sometimes, just as a courtesy to the bill author and the community advocates that worked on a bill, they'll go ahead and have the hearing. And it gives people an outlet to really talk about the issue and their feelings. And, like Justin described, those hearings are where advocates feel the most impactful, I think, because it gives us a platform to be able to confront state violence and state actors in a very real, tangible way. That didn't even happen. And so I think it's one of those bills that if the community really continues to want to rally around, there has to be a real strategy in how to do that and how to message it to a political system that has been staunchly against it. I know what it was like to have a 3G offense and an aggravated charge. That good time, you can accrue it. You can accrue it every day. It's monopoly money. It doesn't mean anything. It's not going to change your eligibility. It means nothing, other than if you get it taken away from during disciplinary. Parole will see that as some type of negative to affect your parole. But I think I accrued, 100%, 200% of my time plus my flat time. It was insane. But it didn't mean anything. And so I think in that strategy too is, I feel like we're going to have to figure out a way to do a better job reaching out to the other side, which is typically victim rights groups. But that has to be strategic with a lot of care and we just need a huge, very thoughtful, very strategic campaign around the Good Time Bill. And we have to stay grounded in some very realistic expectations in terms of our political environment in Texas. And I think that the folks on the inside, if you mention session is happening, the first thing they ask is the Good Time Bill or air conditioning bill, and to not be honest with them and not to be able to provide them a little bit more background and a little bit more civic engagement, education stuff. It just, I don't know. It's so painful to watch that hope happen and it get dashed, and they have no idea why. They don't understand just how difficult this bill is going to be to get it over the finish line. So, yeah, I don't know if Marcy or Christina want to add anything about their thoughts about the good time bill.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jennifer. And I did just want to say, you talked about your good time on your timesheet being 100, 200%. And that's something, as a formerly incarcerated person, that I saw that all the time, not sometimes, not a few isolated cases, but often. So I appreciated you bringing that up. I did want to ask Christina, because you work with a lot of families that have loved ones incarcerated in Texas. And what is your advice what is the easiest way, do you think, for family members to break that down to their incarcerated loved ones in a very realistic and digestible way?
Yeah, I think, the most important thing is to go in having realistic expectations and kind of explain to them, like Jen said, the political environment, and also that the bill is very kind of pie in the sky. It has a lot of really positive things, but in order for a bill like that to pass in the climate that we're currently in, it's probably going to have to be redlined quite a bit. And one of the things that we did was kind of try to explain what the cost of denial is in terms of Texas. So we really came at it too with a kind of like a fiscal strategy, kind of talking about how much it costs taxpayers, to be able to keep someone incarcerated, and really broke down the numbers. And I think that's also really important if they want to kind of talk about, have like a talking point, that, like, this is how much it costs to keep me incarcerated, as an individual. This is how much it costs taxpayers, because that seems to touching on purse strings seems to really hit home with certain people, and so I think that's a good way to talk about it too, is just to have realistic expectations, and for them to understand that accruing good time is still a positive thing, and and just because we don't have a good time bill, it doesn't mean that you should stop trying to accrue the good time, and going to work and not getting disciplinary, and keeping with your line class. So I think you have to come at it with a motivational kind of aspect to it, but also grounded in reality.
Can I emphasize? I was going to emphasize on that, what Christina was just saying, as someone who handles parole cases in the state, for parole review, our clients, I can't overemphasize how important it is going to the parole board to be able to say, no good time has been taken. They've lost no days, right? The disciplinary record is clean. Sort of, those are valuable things to be able to tell the parole board. It doesn't always mean we get the outcome we want, but it resonates. It's something that parole board, you see the members are always writing those notes down about that information. It does matter to them. And so I do think that those are important things to keep in mind, even if you don't get to count the good time towards your eligibility date.
Yeah, I really appreciate those reminders, because yes, they will hold it against you that you got it taken from you. So I always like to try to frame data and stories through an empowerment lens. And I also want to say that even though the hearings are where our kind of, this is the moment we've all been waiting for, and this is where all the intensity happens, there is an incredible amount of work behind the scenes before and after that hearing, right? So that's what I mean around strategy. It's not just showing up to the Capitol on the day of the hearing and that's it. that mean, and that means all these bills, right? Like that means going to every office sometimes. That means going to the committee's offices several times. That means dropping off flyers. That means holding webinars. There is a strategy that is developed around campaign, like a campaign strategy, essentially. So I would want to impress on folks tonight that it's more than just that. That's an important piece, and that's the piece that advocates love, and how that empowers. But it takes more than that, and I think that piece has been missing for a while around several of the criminal justice bills that are important to us, and the ones that we see that impacted us negatively. Well, I can guarantee the opposition, they did all that legwork. They did that strategy. They did their messaging. And the bills that we did help get passed, there was a whole strategy and energy and kind of mobilization around that. So I want to remind folks, the hearing's great. It's important to us. There's so much work that goes around passing or stopping a piece of legislation, especially one like this.
Thanks so much for that, Jennifer. And I think that a good example of kind of rallying around a bill or a number of bills and campaigning for or against is something that the PACT Coalition, the Parole Advocacy Coalition of Texas, did this session. We had a Kill Bill squad. And where we got together and actively campaigned against some bills that would negatively impact our community. And I think that as we're growing, we want you to come grow with us and be a part of things like that. There's a QR code on the screen, and that is a great way to get in. If you're watching on your phone, and I know some of y'all are, I know some of y'all on Facebook or on your phones, that's okay too. I'm going to make sure that where you're watching this from is either from a Lioness page, my personal page, or a TPA page. So I think that Christina and I can agree to make sure we include a link, a follow-up link on those pages, the platforms where this is streaming from, or the LinkedIn page. Don't forget that. And I see y'all scanning the QR code right now. So we appreciate that so much. We want you to be a part of us.
Yeah, please scan that QR code. We need, to Jen's point, like we need to build a movement, right? This isn't just about the legislator. It's about everything. And it's important to not get stuck in these 2-year organizing cycles. And I think part of what a lot of us are trying to do, PACT, but also other folks within the movement are really trying to build out movements. And so please scan that QR code. It's a little inquiry form or membership. And we would love to get you all involved.
I want to tag onto that, Justin, and just say also for people who are not in Austin, that is not a problem. And in fact, that's great because we need to get people all over the state with different legislators representing them, right? They listen to their constituents. And so having membership around the state as a whole is really important. And there's all sorts of ways to get involved in policy work without being here in Austin.
Yes. And I love seeing someone scan the QR code. And I love seeing that. Please scan and share, please, and share with others. So moving on to another bill that I think, I know Jen and Marcy have a lot of experience with this one, but the AC bill, right? HB 3006 by Representative Terry Canales, who's also a Democrat. I think there were I want to say there were 4 or 5 other AC bills that I think got filed this past session, and this is the one that moved. Although again, it did not pass, right? So this one passed out of the House. Right. So it got introduced, got filed, got through the committee and got through the House, but it kind of was knocking on the Senate door, and the Senate door was just no one was there to answer. Right. Which those of us who are in the work know that that's typically how the Senate works. Right. which it's very hard to get in there. So that one made it, and that's not. I don't think that's too uncommon. I think the AC bills have had a lot of success in the House, but it's just the Senate has just been awful when it comes to doing anything with that bill. So I'm going to go ahead and just hand it over to, I don't know if Jen or Marcy or if other folks want to jump in on this one, but.
Oh yeah, I'm warmed up. I'm warmed up and ready to go. So yeah, this was the only AC bill that had any traction, and I think I was shocked. I don't know why I was shocked, but I was, because Lioness and several other organizations are a part of an organizational lawsuit against TDCJ about the heat. And our federal judge did say that it was unconstitutional. He did not go ahead and say, hey, you need to put the temp air in now, because he felt like it may mess up actual permanent air. But he said it was plainly unconstitutional, and we go into trial. But I really hoped and thought that the legislators would be like, let's head this off at the pass. Let's go ahead and get the money. We had the money. We've had the money for 2 sessions. For that, I know for sure. And they didn't. They were just like, this bill's not even going to even get near close to the finish line. And the House has predominantly, over the past couple of years, been really supportive of getting those temperatures down in our prisons. And the Senate is just very stubborn. And this session, last session, the lieutenant governor did refer it, right? Because once it got to the Senate, then the lieutenant governor is making sure bills get referred to committees and stuff. And last time it got to the Senate Finance, where Senator Joan Huffman, who was the chair, said, no, we're not hearing it. she got to the committee heads decide, and she was like, no. This time, lieutenant governor didn't even refer it. And so that has shown us that the Senate does not see this as a priority. What we do see is they understand that it's a problem. And what they do, to me, is piecemeal that funding under the disguise of maintenance or other cost to TDCJ's budget. And it is slowly, incrementally adding cooling beds or AC housing areas. But it's going to take us forever. The timeline on that is, good Lord, there's going to be so many illnesses and deaths before that fully happens. And I personally, Jennifer Toon's opinion, is that they don't want to be seen as we approved air conditioning for incarcerated people. But they know it's a problem, so we're just going to siphon a little money at a time to get the agency to do it. And many of y'all probably saw a TDCJ post on their socials and websites about their plan to do some air conditioning over the next couple of years but it's just drops in the bucket. It's really shocking. Marcy or Christina, if you wanted to add anything.
I'm putting Christina in the hot box. I know, as someone, a leader in the Texas prison advocates, if I'm saying that wrong, please forgive me, that I know that you hear from this time of year. The heat is on. Literally, it's very hot outside. It's very hot inside of Texas prisons. I know that you are hearing tons. So please, share a little bit about that.
Yeah, so for I guess I didn't introduce myself. My name is Christina Wadahosky, and I work with Texas Prisons Alliance, and I am a vice president. And we do hear a lot actual documentation of heat logs from TDCJ. These will be the hottest weeks in Texas coming up, with Garza West being the hottest unit based on inside temperature recordings. So, there are ways that you can help keep your loved one cool. And that includes, like helping them purchase a fan, making sure they're drinking electrolytes, getting cool tails. But we also know that those things are band-aids to a much larger problem. But we do want to try to make sure that your loved ones are as comfortable as possible. So anything that you can do to help them while they are in there. But just as families, educate yourself. We have requests for assistance. You can submit a request. When you do submit a request to us, if you let us know the location, that's the easiest way for us to say, like, this, it's a whole block that has not gotten any water, that is not, you know, that the heat or the AC isn't working, that they don't have electricity or whatever, and then we can advocate on your loved one's behalf. But it's good to know like a location and a time, so that way when we correspond with administration, we can let them know those, because that's the first question they ask us is, well, where did it happen and when, and you know, who. So if you give that information to us up front, then we can start advocating right away instead of having to come back to you and ask for more information. And we know it's so hot, and we feel for you. We all have loved ones who are inside as well. And if there's anything that you can do, please, or anything that we can do, like, please reach out to us as an organization and post on our page, and let us know what we can do to advocate for your loved one.
And before we wrap it up and move it on to the next bill, I am going to also say, anybody who would like to come to the Lioness Community Vigil in Gatesville on September 6th, I know this wasn't on the agenda for me to say, but I just feel like it's important. We come together as a community with other partners and other folks and family members that we just hold a candlelight vigil in the evening to really be in the place where most of our members were incarcerated, which is Gatesville, and there's a men's facility there as well. And to just hold space and really honor what our folks, and including staff and family members, have experienced in this deadly heat in our prison. So you're more than welcome to join us on September 6th, 7, 8-ish in Gatesville at their local park. I'll turn it back to you, Justin.
No, all good. Yeah, no, just to, I know there was a question that came up. I don't really know if it's going to have much. I think honestly, probably what's going to need to happen is this is probably going to need to be like a court led intervention. I don't really know, because again, AC stuff has been here for a long time, and the Senate has always been a problem. And unless things drastically change, I don't see that ever being any different. And so, I mean, I think that lawsuit's probably going to be important because I think, and I hope I'm not making this up, but I think if like to Jen's point, if they keep piecemealing it, I think we're talking like decades. Like, it's not just like a few years. Like, if it just continues on this, it's going to be decades before they get AC where it's needed. Okay, thank you all for the questions. I also, again, I love seeing the QR code scan, so please keep that going. Okay, commutation. I know this has also been a big thing on people's radar. So we're going to talk about some of the commutation bills. So there were two of them that I think we're going to kind of highlight today. So one of them is House Bill 3166 by Representative David Cooks, Republican, and we have House Bill 773 by Representative Joe Moody, who's a Democrat. Now both of these bills did not pass. The House Bill 3166 made it out of committee. All right, so that made it further than 773, which was never heard in committee. And I'm sure, you know, there are, while both of these bills deal with commutations, there are some pretty like important differences between these bills, and I think Christina's going to talk a little bit about that. But I do just want to say, like, the big through line between these two bills is sort of, if these were to have passed, this would have created like a judge-led commutation process, right? Meaning a judge, not the governor, would have the power to reduce a person's prison sentence. Because right now, the parole board like makes their reviews, right? They give they review the applications, they make a recommendation to the governor, and then the governor is the one who's saying yay or nay. And so these bills are one of the big things that's common is that they're changing that to, again, that judge-led commutation process. But I'll hand it over to Christina to talk a little bit about these bills.
Yeah, so I know that the one that was really heavily promoted was 773, but the one that made it further was HB 3166. And so both of these, they required 2 additional constitutional amendments to be filed, which I know there weren't a lot of what you saw as HJR, which were the House Joint Resolutions, and those that were paired with that were HJR 60 and HJR 148. And both of these bills, they aim to change how people could actually receive sentence reduction or judicial commutation. And these bills would have given the power to judges to be able to shorten certain prison sentences when someone has changed or aged or they no longer posed a risk. And today, as Justin said, only the governor can actually commute a sentence. And normally that's only with a recommendation from the Board of Pardons and Paroles. And these bills would have allowed the courts or the judges to also consider reducing sentences, which would have possibly meant less backlog. And that's especially important for those who have served like many years, are rehabilitated, and are growing older in prison. When we know that the average age in prison is 41. And in Texas prisons. And so this kind of would have created a new path home for many people inside. And of the two bills, the bill 773 by Moody, it created a really detailed judicial commutation process for people who were over the age of 50, had served 15 plus years, or if they were 35 to 49 and had served 20 years. It did exclude certain capital and cases. It did require a court hearing, but it was a little more broad in terms of what it could offer. The Cook-Jones bill, which was a bipartisan bill, had a little bit narrower vision. It excluded all of the 3G kind of violent offenses. There was no age or time served minimum, and there was no right to appeal, and there was no data transparency in that afterward. So in terms of what families can do next, just stay involved. It will be very difficult to get bills like this passed. It's not going to be an easy road at all, similar to some of the other things that we've talked about. The governor likes having that power of commutation, and so giving that also to the courts would have been kind of a big step. But we can push for stronger versions going forward, share stories with lawmakers, start talking to your legislators now, and join us and keep organizing. Scan the QR code, keep organizing, and help us make people understand that our loved ones are more than their worst mistakes, and that these bills are really a chance to kind of show that people can grow and change, and are ready to come home. But we need you to help us continue that work.
Beautifully said. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I know we're getting low on time, and we're almost done. Okay, so this next bill is close to my heart, Jen. I know it's close. So Senate Bill 2756. This is a bill by Senator Molly Cook, who's become my new favorite human being. She is absolutely amazing. Her staff is amazing. It's incredible to have people like her in that Capitol building that can often be full of a lot of darkness. And she has been incredible, seriously, and has been an absolute advocate when it comes to parole. Those who know me, normally I'm not like a huge rah-rah for legislators, but she has been really incredible. And she filed this bill for us. So myself, Jennifer, and our friend at Kirsten with the Texas Civil Rights Project, we put this bill together that looks at the state's medically recommended intensive supervision program, MRIS program, which I'm going to try and not because this is my passion soapbox, right? But it's essentially like a way in which folks who are elderly and or have real debilitating health issues to have a pathway to get out of a cage and get into where they need to be to get the care that they need in a suitable environment and not in a prison environment. And this has been around for decades. It's been around since the early 90s. And to Christina's point, those 55 and older are the fastest growing demographic populations within Texas. Medical is a huge issue, both on the cost side and the human side, and yet we have handfuls of people that get approved for this type of program, and there's lots of reasons why. But I love this bill for lots of reasons. I think for me, it pushed a lot. It would have allowed more people to qualify. It would have created a presumption of release, right? Meaning if people meet all of the criteria and all of the stuff, let them go. Unless there's very strong evidence that these people are so dangerous, let them go, right? And then also the big thing is limiting denials, right? So if this bill would have passed, it would have, the parole panel couldn't deny someone solely because of their nature of offense or criminal history when it came to this program. But this is a huge bill. Jen and I will probably be working this to our grave. We'll see. I don't know. But yeah, it's huge. Jen, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that.
Yeah, I think it was, one of those bills that, I care about parole reform overall, but especially when it comes to ankle monitors and medical recommended parole. It's very dear to me. Many of us at Linus, we knew a woman. Her name was Tessa, and her mother struggled and fought and fought and fought to finally get her home to hospice so she could be with her family when she passed. And there was a lot of issues in Tessa's case, including the horrible way women are treated on medical transport, is why she didn't want to go get medical treatment. And then when it was time that her mother was trying to utilize this very mysterious process, right? Like I don't think the agency and the parole board has done a good job, like really helping families and incarcerated people understand this process. I'm still confused by it. And so just to see her and remember in real time what she went through, and her mother just barely getting her home in time. And she, like we've already talked about in terms of the mystery of overall parole, had been denied parole. She had almost done her whole 15. She had just been denied regular parole and had about 2 years left on her sentence, and they still didn't want to give her medical release. And it's horrifying. One of the comments earlier when Mandy was talking about the heat, we're talking about human beings. I don't care what they did. And it makes this very personal for all of us. And so that's why the reform around medical release because it just feels like how dare Texas talk about all the things that Texas talks about in terms of caring for people and compassion and all this stuff, around other types of issues, and then watches people die in the heat and people die, from medical problems and issues, that it was clearly there was a mechanism created to get those folks out there to be with their family in those last moments. And it's just, I've never seen it work well. And none of us who were incarcerated really fully understood the process to even try to be able to utilize this process. So I do it in honor of Tessa, and Linus does it in honor of all the women we knew like Tessa.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for that. I'll only add very quickly is that in my 10 years experience incarcerated, I never knew not one person that qualified or, that jumped through the hoops the right way. And so, yeah, we appreciate for sure the folks working on this bill. I see y'all active in the chat, and thank you for tagging folks that might be interested in this. And if you tag someone, they can go back and watch the beginning as soon as this live ends. So if you know someone who needs to know about this kind of stuff that we're talking about the Texas Ledge and what happened in the 89th session and breaking it down, if you know someone that's been asking you questions, tag them, share this live with them. We would appreciate that so much. We appreciate you all joining us. And so we are going to stay a little bit past our allotted time. We promised we would get you out at 30 minutes after the hour, but we have a really important bill, probably the most important bill that happened in the 89th Ledge, and that is the Sunset Bill. That term might even be new to some of you, so we're going to break down exactly what that is, what happened. They're going to break it down, not me. I'm going to listen and learn with you all. And then we're going to stay on and in case anybody has questions after that. So y'all hang tight. Make sure you're scanning that QR code so you can be a part of this coalition that's working on these kind of issues, especially surrounding parole here in Texas.
Thanks, Marcy. Yeah.
Can I just say, Justin?
Oh, yeah.
Justin, I know you were asking too about anyone who's gone through the MRIS process. So if anyone who's watching this, or who knows someone who has gone through the MRIS process, if you are interested in like telling your story or wanting to participate in some of the MRIS like research going on with the legislation, you can reach out to me or through the TPA page or anything like that, and I can pass your information on to Justin if that's easier, or you can get in touch with Justin directly. And so then that way it can be added to the research that's already ongoing for the MRIS bill.
Yes, thank you, Christina. See, these are incredible. I work with incredible people, y'all. This is amazing. Okay, let's end with sunset. So what is it, and what is it, and why does it matter? So I'm gonna try and be brief here, because I know, but I think in short, sunset matters because sunset is how Texas makes sure that certain state agencies, at least, still make sense. like do we need this agency, right? And if we do need this agency, is it doing its job? I mean, is it performing its functions and operations in a way that's effective? Effective, right? I think that's like in a nutshell what sunset is. I mean, sunset, it's the Sunset Advisory Commission, and it is itself a state agency that I think it came about in the 70s. But that's what it does. It essentially basically asks, is this agency still relevant? And if that answer is yes, then sunset goes through a really intensive review process and makes all kinds of findings and recommendations on what the legislator needs to consider and look at when it's looking to improve, again, those operations and functions of that agency. Now, again, sunset could be like, no, we don't need this agency, and so they can get rid of the agency, or most of the time what happens is they'll disperse the functions of that agency within other agencies already there. And so why does this matter? Why are we talking about it? Well, this past legislative session, essentially all of the adult state correctional agencies, right? So TDCJ, Board of Pardons and Paroles, Wyndham, right? All of those went through this process. And this is important because agencies, this is not something that happens every year. Okay, this only happens, I think it's like every 12 or 13 years. So we won't see, I can't do simple math, but we're 2025. So in 13 years is when TDCJ and all that will be up again, right? So we won't have this type of like intense focus on an agency like we did this past session. And then the other reason why this is such an important piece, this is such an important process, is because legislators have to pass a bill addressing these issues. Now, they can mess with the recommendations and all that stuff, but they have to pass a bill, right? So, all the stuff that we work on, where there's no like requirement that lawmakers have to pass stuff, with this, they have to. At the end of the session, there needs to be a bill with something, okay? And so that's also what makes this important. So we're going to kind of talk just a little bit about, I think, some of the highlights. But again, if you can scan that QR code, and if you want to learn more or get more involved in it, we can do that for sure. I will start out by saying that this was a huge bill. This was like 91 pages, right? So we're not going to be able to get really in depth on it, but really just share some of the highlights, particularly around parole. And I know for me, there were many things that I found appalling and shocking in these reports and findings. But one of the things that I found that Sunset talked about that I think a lot of us kind of really care about, particularly when it comes to parole, is institutional parole officers and the process that they go through when gathering information to put together someone's case summary, right? So when they come up for parole review, right? So IPOs, institutional parole officers, big part of their job is interviewing folks. As they come up through the review process, they create that case summary that then the parole board uses when they're making the parole determinations. And essentially what Sunset found, and I mean, this is not just me I think this is kind of word for word, is that this process is inefficient and it is ineffective and provides way too much power to IPOs and doesn't actually gather useful information that parole voters need when determining whether or not someone is suitable for release or not. Right. And I know for me, I often hear a lot from folks about like the whole review process and the IPO and the interviews that they do and all of that stuff. And so Sunset addressed this. And so part of what came out of the Sunset process was the staff was like, hey, this is an issue. TDCJ, BPP, y'all need to fix this. And it stayed. And so part of the requirement moving forward for TDCJ and BPP is to like sit down and figure this out, y'all. Like look at this process and figure out how can you make this more meaningful and more transparent, right? And so we'll have to see how all of that looks, right? Because they haven't really started that process yet. But that's something like to keep in mind, particularly if you've got folks on the inside, like for them to know that, hey, this was an issue that's supposed to being addressed in some form or fashion, right? And as that develops, we'll have more to say. I don't know if anyone else had any other things that they wanted to point out regarding the Sunset stuff that was important for them.
I think the programming piece is important. Really sort of being aware of the delays that are occurring for individuals who are being asked to do pre-release programming, how long people are stuck inside TDCJ after having been approved for parole. The Sunset staff report really talks about this at length, and I do think they try to address some of it. I will say, just anecdotally, I've been seeing, somebody in our chat here talked about influx of parole approvals. I've also seen with my clients fewer programs being required and faster completion of programs. So I do think, so what they talk about is reducing parole voted program placement timelines by at least 50%. So really trying to reduce the amount of time. And one of the things we also are seeing is telling, like, the Board of Parole will, when they vote approval, saying we want them to start a program by this date. And if they haven't started it by this date, then you need to come back to us and let us know that so that we can decide whether we're going to change our vote. So the board is trying to push TDCJ to really move people through the programming, the pre-release programming process faster, and reduce some of that lag time between approval and discharge.
Yeah. Yeah, and also too on the programming, something else that was kind of shocking was when Sunset was looking at programs that is available, they couldn't get a number. They got, I think it was like anywhere between 97 to 3,000 programs that were being offered. So like one of like the kind of like moments that came out of Sunset was TDCJ is going to now be required to create this comprehensive inventory of programming that they have, and that is continuously updated and made available to the public. So that's also something, I think, to Helen's point around programming, that hopefully we'll be seeing in the near future is like, okay, what are all you doing? Like, what are the goals of these programs? What are you offering? And where are they at in particular units and all of that stuff? Like, that's going to be supposed to be put together in this publicly available comprehensive inventory list. I'm assuming on their website or something.
I just want to add that although I think we would have loved to see more robust things in the Sunset Bill, I do want to highlight again, just to celebrate the wins, and anybody who participated in the Sunset review process, whether that was, we had members on the inside that we educated in our newsletter about what Sunset was, and they wrote letters. We went in person. Me and Mandy and other members went in person to talk to Sunset because they asked for that input, like Justin talked about. And the things that we offered, I did see show up in their recommendations, right? And I just want to take a moment to celebrate that, because to me, that showed they heard us, like they really heard incarcerated people and community advocates, even though, I feel like there was some things that were not as robust as we wanted. And I'll use the example, it doesn't have anything to do necessarily with parole, but program related, was that, when they said, hey, rehabilitation division, they were very critical of that division. And TDCJ moved that under reentry even before they were in the process of doing that, before session was over, because they knew that was going to end up in that bill anyway. So we might as well go ahead and start doing that. and moving higher education, for instance, back under Wyndham, which I can't tell you how many of us, especially women that have participated in higher education and TDCJ, was begging and pleading to move that back to Wyndham. And to see that happen, and then now to see Wyndham really doing some great work around that, it's empowering. Like, it does work. I mean, I hate to be cliche and say it does work if you work it, because it doesn't often. But when it does, it really speaks to the power of the community, just being relentless, because if they didn't have any of that information, all they have is the state agencies self-report. Well, ask me to do a self-report about myself, and it's going to be glowing, I promise you. So I just wanted to say thank you, everyone that really participated in that process, participated with us in our community at Linus, and the other advocates. It really seems like some small wins or some unsexy wins, but they're going to be impactful for the people on the inside.
Thanks so much for that, Jennifer. And I do want to shout out all of the organizations and individuals, because we saw that. We saw that in Texas Prisons Alliance. We saw that with Lioness. We saw that with Texas Defender Service. When I remember being at the Sunset hearing, seeing so many different organizations there giving input. And again, that was at the hearing, but there was a lot of back end campaigning around that. So that was an excellent example of how we come together and really make stuff happen. And that was one win. You're right. We can count a lot of the things in that bill as a win. I love that we have someone in the chat, and I'll just highlight her comment. Lisa is in contact with lots of incarcerated women, and she said that they are already expressing to her that they're benefiting from the change, how Wyndham is over that. So, and we hear that as well on Linus's end. Thank you so much for that. Someone else might have some more to add about the sunset, but I want to encourage y'all. We're going to stay on just a little bit past our time because we want to hear from you. So please ask questions, and we're here for it. So we're all going to stay here for just a little bit longer.
The only thing I'll say is that I know that part of in Sunset, they talked about that the board members were going to get training in like trauma informed care and substance abuse. And I know that Justin and Helen both were at the workshop where they actually did start to do that. So some of these things are already being implemented. So that is how quickly the turnaround can be with some of this legislation. And so you can see the benefit almost immediately from certain bills that are passed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, y'all don't be shy. Y'all got questions? You don't want to hear more? Maybe get some more QR scans on the top.
I did see some folks in the chat that were having trouble scanning the QR, and I'll tell you, I have trouble all the time, and I most certainly did more recent after my release from incarceration. That was a brand new thing to me. So don't sweat it, because you're either watching from one of Texas Prison Alliance's platforms, a Linus platform, or my personal platform. We will make sure that link, and I put a couple in there. When my team didn't notice me on my phone, I put a couple already. So if you see it, go ahead and scan. You can go ahead and click that link now, and we'll celebrate you and welcome you, because we would definitely love to grow. So who are we? We are the Parole Advocacy Coalition of Texas, PACT, PACT. And we are an organization, or we are a coalition made up of several organizations, advocates, formerly incarcerated folks that have come together to really put a spotlight on the parole system in Texas. And we would love your input. We would love your to be in community with you, and we would love to get to work with you on this important issue in our state. So any other questions from the chat? Please feel free.
We welcome questions, and we have a one-sheeter, like a little graphic that details all of the things that we talked about, and I'll post that on our Texas Prisons Alliance site, but I also sent it to other PACT members, so they will probably post it on theirs as well. And it kind of just summarizes very briefly the things that we talked about. And feel free to reach out to any of us that you see on this webinar tonight.
Thanks so much for that, Christina. And that was an excellent information sheet. So we will be happy to be posting that on the Linus pages as well. Any final thoughts from these experts in the room?
I mean, go ahead.
I was just going to say about Sunset. The Sunset staff put together an excellent report. And it's really worth reading that report, quite separate and apart from what made it into sort of recommendations from the Sunset Commission and what made it into the final Sunset Bill. There's a lot of information in the report. You can get all of it off the website if you just Google Texas Sunset Commission, and you can look and find the TDCJ documents. And I think it provides a great roadmap for where we want attention to be placed going forward. And so, as we think about kind of that strategy that Jen's talking about, and interim and the work that's going to be happening over the next year and a half, getting ready for the next session, all the preparation that goes into that, we have some really good areas that we know we have good data on because Sunset staff provided us that data, and that we have people who we can speak with at the legislature. So I as much as was not in the Sunset Bill, I actually find the Sunset staff report very hopeful, and I'm excited to think about ways that we can sort of craft new legislation out of those suggestions.
Yeah, and I'll just say as a close, parole is critical. It's an absolute critical piece of the criminal legal system that does not get the attention that other parts of the system does, like policing and courts. And yet we have 90,000 people who go through it every year, and many of them just are trapped in a cycle of incarceration because of just the way parole is set up. And PACT is really all about trying to break that cycle and to work on policy, yes, and do all of that stuff. But again, to build community, to build a place of belonging for people who care about parole, who want to work with parole, who've been impacted by parole, and are tired of the stuff that happens and the way that things are. And we're trying to really build out this group of incredible folks that we really would love for you all to be a part of, to again really take on that system and to really break that cycle of incarceration and get our people home, right? Get in with the people they love, with their support systems, back in their community, getting their lives back and going. So yeah, we'd love to have you. If you have friends or if you know people who weren't able to make it, share this, but also let them know about us. And we definitely would love to welcome you all to the group.
Thanks so much for that. And thank you for all of your expertise. And thank you for everyone who joined us. We see you. We are so happy to be in community with you. Thank you for giving us this space to discuss these important things. And you all stay tuned, because we're going to have more of things like this. And I will just shout out, we do have another event coming up. PACT is going to host a screening of the prison show, a documentary, an award-winning documentary. That screening will take place in Austin, Texas, and I am sorry that I don't have the link just super handy at the moment, but I'll make sure that it's in the chat of these as well. And so we will go ahead and close with that. Thank you so much again.
Real quick, y'all.
Yeah.
And everybody's like, oh, here she goes. Right at the last minute, we were going to leave. Hey, y'all, August 19th in Austin, the board for the Texas Department of Criminal Justice is meeting. It's open to public comment. Now, they don't have anything to do with parole, right? Like the parole board has their own separate time that they do their meetings. This is about issues around programming, conditions of confinement, the heat any of those issues that TDCJ, the prison agency, is responsible for. It's open to public comment. Several of us will be there. You can check it out on TDCJ's website, and I'm sure all of my PAC members here will make sure that you have the logistics. Please, if you want to come out and give your testimony or your comments on any of the issues related to TDCJ, their board meeting is happening on August 19th in Austin. Okay.
Yeah, and if you can't make it, but you still want to watch it, they do stream it on their YouTube channel, the TDCJ YouTube channel. So if you just can't make it to Austin, you can still at least watch, just so you could educate yourself. And then the minutes are posted also on the TDCJ website.
And you can speak to issues relating to the parole division, not parole decision making. It's not going to deal with anything that's board of pardons and paroles related, but the parole division is within their jurisdiction. And so come and talk about that too.
That was valuable information. You were coming in hot last minute, Jen Toon. Thank you so much for that. And thank you, Tammy, for putting that in the comment section so that we can highlight that for folks watching that maybe just missed the date. And we will go ahead and close, and we will see you all.